Welcome back to All This Math. This is Professor Parker, and today we're doing a video dealing with Black-owned business math. Now, this is kind of like a new playlist that I'm creating, kind of like a new area of video content that I'm creating where I get to teach math and at the same time highlight and promote Black-owned businesses. All right, so today's business that we're going to highlight and promote is Food Chaser's Kitchen. Food Chaser's Kitchen is a restaurant located outside of Philadelphia in Elkins Park. I've been there a couple of times. I've been down with them since last summer. As I record this video, this is the night before the Super Bowl. The Eagles are playing the Chiefs tomorrow. And that actually prompted this video. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Because, of course, I think math is more relatable if there's a story around it, right? Or a story behind it, right? So we highlighting Food Chaser's Kitchen. Shout out to the sisters and the family that run that restaurant. Support them. And the food is great, so it's not like you just like supporting somebody that, makes, subpar or mediocre food. Like the food is actually great for real. Like, so go check them out. Go to their Instagram page, Food Chasers, go to their website and all that. This is where this problem came from. I'm scrolling on Facebook, right? I probably should have been doing something more productive with my time. But anyway, I got caught in the scroll. I'm scrolling on Facebook. I see my man Brent, who's also known as Mr. B, who was part of Fathers Read 365. Check out the work that they've been doing. They have a documentary coming out talking about, a short or a documentary, I'm not sure, but it's about the importance of fathers reading to children. All right. He posted something about the differences in the amount of steak meat that the restaurant had to order before Jalen Hurts did this interview where he shouted out his signature cheesesteak, because they got a signature, Food Chaser's Kitchen has a signature Jalen Hurts cheesesteak, right? So one of the reporters asked Jalen Hurts a question about it, and he shouted them out. And, and then subsequent to that, then the sisters were interviewed, the sisters that own the restaurant, they were interviewed on the local news, and, of course, with popularity, that brings business, which is a good thing, right? So one of the things Brent said was, he said that before the interview, typically, they would use 30 pounds of steak meat in a week. All right, 30 pounds of steak meat in 1 week. After the interview, right? After the interview that Jalen Hurts did, right? They were using 80 pounds of steak meat. They used 80, like right after that interview, and everybody saw it, they used 80 pounds of steak meat in just 2 days. So me being me, I read this, and the way my mind works is I'm always thinking of math problems. I can't help it. Like I read something and I think of, some way mathematically to analyze the information or to create a problem that I can make a video out of, like this one, right? So somebody can benefit from it and I can make something relevant. Because, one of the complaints students always have is, when I'm going to use this stuff, why do I need to know this? So I always try to make relevant math videos, right? Something that people can relate to. And this deals with business, right? Dealing with percent increases on product that you have to buy, whether it be on a daily basis or a weekly basis, which is what we're going to get into. If you want to go into entrepreneurship, this is something you got to understand. You got to know how to do the numbers and how to do the math, right? So that's where this video came from, and that's where this idea for this problem came from. So what we're going to figure out in this problem is, based on this information and how before the Jalen Hurts interview, Food Chaser's Kitchen was using 30 pounds of steak meat in 1 week. And after the interview, they started using 80 pounds of steak meat in just 2 days. And I like that because that means we got to do a little more work, to make things, uniform. We're going to figure out the daily percentage increase, and we're also going to figure out the weekly percentage increase. Now, you might be wondering, like, what's the purpose of figuring out a percentage increase? Because percentages are like a uniform means of measurement, right? They're easily comparable to other percentages. Of course, you could just say, all right, well, how much was they using before the interview? How much was they using after the interview, and just subtract one from the other? You'll get an amount of like how many pounds, but that doesn't really tell the whole story. And that's not as adequate to really, as I said, tell the story, for what the growth is like. All right. So let's do this. Let's first figure out the daily percent increase. All right. With the daily percent increase, we want to know, okay, so on a daily basis, how much meat were they using? How much steak meat were they using on a daily basis before the interview? And then how much meat were they using on a daily basis, meaning in 1 day, not a week, not a month, not a year, right? Just in 1 day. compared to and this is on average, right? Compared to after the interview. So this says 30 pounds in a week. So the first thing we gotta do is figure out, well, okay, like how many days is in a week? Like what does a week represent? What does that mean? Like typically a week will be 7 days. If we're talking about a work week, it will be 5 days. But I think, I'm not sure, I didn't check with my man on this, but I think this is 4 days and I know this because, like I said, I've been there before, and I was supposed to go this past Thursday, but I got caught up with Kwame, and the day got away from me, so I ended up not going. Anyway, they're open on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, if I'm not mistaken. I know they open on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'm pretty sure they open on Sundays too normally. So that means a week is actually 4 days. A week would actually be 4 days. So let me write that. I'm pretty sure. And even if I'm wrong about this, we're just going to rock with this information just for the sake of doing this problem. All right. So 30 pounds in 4 days. So if I want to know, well, first thing I need to know is how many pounds is this in one day? How many pounds is it in one day? So if there's 30 pounds used in 4 days, 1 day is just 1/4 of that. So basically all I need to do to figure out the average daily amount of meat used is I take this 30 and divide it by 4, because I'm dividing this 30 pounds into 4 equal pieces. That's why we need to know division, so we can do problems like this in these type of situations. So I'm gonna say 30 divided by 4, and I already know because I did this problem in my head already. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5. So that means that, and you can put this in your calculator and do it too. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5. So that means that in 1 day, on average, they'll use 7.5 pounds of steak meat, right? On 1 day, right? On average, 7.5 pounds of steak meat, right? Now, let's look at after the interview. It says that they used 80 pounds in 2 days. So if you want to know, okay, well, how much would that be in 1 day on average? If they use 80 pounds in 2 days, then we want to just basically figure out what 1 day is. 1 day is just half of 2 days. So if you take half of the amount of time, you also take half of the amount of meat. Just like how we did here. We take 1/4 of the amount of time because it was 4 days total. So we took 1/4 of the time. We also take 1/4 of the meat, which is the same as doing 30 divided by 4, which is how we got 7.5 pounds, right? So if I do 80 divided by 2, that gives me 40 pounds. All right, so these are the two numbers that I'm gonna compare. 7.5 pounds and 40 pounds. 7.5 pounds and 40 pounds. So that's a significant jump. That's a real significant jump, actually. They went from 7.5 pounds to 40 pounds. So now, and this is why I mentioned earlier about the value of percentages, because somebody might look at this and just say, okay, well, why don't we just do the subtraction? 40 minus 7.5, we get 32.5, and say, okay, well, they use 32.5 more pounds of meat on a daily basis, after, before the interview compared to after the interview. Well, that's cool. You could do that. But again, percentages give you a more adequate means of manipulating information and showing information. It tells a better story. Percentages tell a better story. That's why it's important for us to be proficient in understanding how to do work with percentages. All right. So check this out right here. This formula is the percentage change formula. Now, it's percentage change, meaning it could represent a percentage increase or it could represent a percentage decrease. In this particular situation, we see what happened. We went from 7.5 to 40. So we know that's an increase. And we already knew it was an increase because it went from 30 to 80. Well, actually, no, that's not valid. We can't just say that. We would have to have uniform amounts of time in order to compare that, actually. So I can't just say that because it went from 30 to 80. That's not good enough. But if we do it look at it on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, because we got to compare the same amount of time, right? We can't compare weeks to days, right? We can't do that, right? Because that doesn't give us an adequate picture of what's going on. But on a daily basis, we see we went from 7.5 to 40. So we know that's an increase, all right? But either way, we're still going to use this formula. And I highly recommend that you memorize this formula, right? As soon as possible. Memorize this formula. New minus old divided by old times 100. So the new amount minus the old amount divided by the old amount, that's your fraction. And then you're going to get a number. And then you take that number and multiply it by 100. Once you multiply by 100, now you have the percentage increase or decrease. So let's see what happened in terms of the daily percentage increase. So the daily percentage increase, we say, okay, well, what's the new amount of steak meat? The new amount in a day is 40 pounds. So I'm going to replace the word new with 40. And then I'm going to put a minus sign. And then I want the old amount of steak meat. So the old amount on a daily basis was 7.5 pounds, right? So we put 7.5 right here, right? And then we write the old amount again, because that's your denominator, 7.5. And then we're going to multiply by 100. All right? So what we're going to do is, we're going to do 40 take away 7.5. 40 take away 7.5 is going to be, again, and we already talked about that, that's 32.5. And then 32.5 divided by 7.5 is what we're going to do next. And then, and I already know, I know this because, because I did it on the calculator. 32.5 divided by 7.5 is 4.33. Right? Then I'm going to multiply that by 100 because this is not the answer. This is not the percentage. This is the number that's going to become the percentage. So I do 4.33 times 100. Anytime you multiply a number by 100, you essentially are moving the decimal point 2 spaces to the right. Or if you follow the Eureka Math curriculum, this is the way they look at it. They want you to keep the decimal point stationary and move the numbers to the left. Either way, you're going to end up with 433. Either way, you're going to end up with 433. Whether you move the decimal point 2 spaces to the right, or you leave the decimal point stationary and move the digits 2 spaces to the left, you're going to end up with 433. So that means that there was a 433% increase in steak meat from before the Jalen Hurts press conference to after the Jalen Hurts press conference. So as you see numerically, you see the power of advertising. You see the power of marketing. You see the power of shout outs. You see the power of that. And we see it numerically, right? 433% represents 4 times, over four times the amount of growth, right? What you started with, multiplied by 4. And more than that because it's 433%. All right? So that's 433% in growth, right? That's the daily percent increase. Now, let's see what happens when we calculate the weekly percent increase. Let's see what happens. All right? So if we want to calculate the weekly percent increase, we need to know how much meat was used in a week. Now, prior to the press conference, we know it was 30 pounds, right? 30 pounds in a week. But after the press conference, this says 80 pounds in 2 days. So now we got to think, okay, well, 2 days is not a whole week. But how many days is a whole week? A whole week is going to be 4 days. We already said that. We're going with the idea that a whole week is 4 days because I know they open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? So if they use this much meat, steak meat in 2 days, if they keep pace with that, right, and they go at the same rate, then you should be able to just double this and do 2 times 2 to get 4 days. So if you double the time, you should also double the quantity of steak meat. So if I do 2 times 2 to get 4, I can do 80 times 2 and I get 160. Let me write that down. So 80 times 2 equals 160 pounds, right? So this should be how much is used in a week at this rate, right? If it's 80 pounds in 2 days, then it should be, if everything stays consistent, right? Then it should be 160 pounds gets used in 4 days, right? So now let's go back to our formula and let's figure out the weekly percent increase. All right, so let's do the new. The new is 160 pounds, right? Minus the old. The old was 30. Again, divided by the old is 30. Then we're going to multiply that by 100. So 160 take away 30 is 130. So then we got 130 divided by 30. I know I'm all over the place, but please bear with me. So 160 take away 30 over 30 times 100 is the same thing as 130 over 30 times 100, right? So check this out. 130 divided by 30. Let me grab my calculator just to make sure. Let me show you something. Let me show you what happens, right? 130 divided by 30 still gives me 4.33. Now, I knew that was going to happen, but I just wanted to show you something. I just wanted to show you that the percentage increase is going to be the same whether you analyze the information according to a daily basis or a weekly basis, because it's the same amount of steak meat, right? It's the same amount of steak meat. So the percent increase is going to be the same because it increased at the same rate because it's the same amount. It still went from 30 pounds in 4 days to 160 pounds in 2 days. And that's the same thing as, you know, going from 7.5 pounds in 1 day to 40 pounds in 1 day, right? Because it's about the relationship between the numbers, between the new amount and the old amount. That relationship is the same. So this is still going to be 433% as well. So it represents a growth rate of over 4 times what it started with. 4 times what it started with. And that should make sense, because if you do 30 times 4, that's 120. 30 times 4 is 120, right? So if it was 4 times as much, you would get to 120 pounds. But this is 130, which is more than 120 pounds, which is more than four times as much. So 4 times as much is 433. 4 times as much is 400%. But we have 433%. So this is just the way to put this whole problem right here, is the way to put a mathematical spin on, you know, something that we see all the time. And again, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, make sure that you know how to do this type of math. So when you're sitting in class, whether you're in middle school or high school, and you got aspirations of going into entrepreneurship, don't sit there and think math is irrelevant, because math is very relevant. That's what a lot of people want you to think. A lot of people want you to think math is irrelevant, so that way you won't be competition and you won't be able to be successful in entrepreneurship, because you got to know math, right? You got to know math. You got to know algebra. You got to know how to do calculations. You got to know how to do all of that. All right. So don't get discouraged, and don't buy into the hype that, you know, math is too hard. Don't buy into the hype that math is irrelevant, because really what it is a lot of people get caught up and they accept this idea that math is too hard for them. So as a way to protect our egos, we start telling ourselves stuff like, well, math is irrelevant. I don't need it. Right. When for real, you've accepted the idea that it's too hard for you. When really you probably just need more practice, or you need a different explanation. And that's why this YouTube channel is here. So you can get some different explanations of some of the same math concepts that you might see in school. Maybe you didn't understand when your teacher explained it. Maybe you couldn't really understand it, you know, in class, or, you know, when somebody else tried to explain it to you or whatever. That's what this channel is here for. So anyway, again, this is our black-owned business math. And I will be coming with some other videos featuring different types of businesses at different times from different parts of the country. If you're in Philly, go check out Food Chaser's Kitchen, straight out Old York Road in Elkins Park. Just Google them, you'll find them. If you're not in Philly, if you plan on visiting Philadelphia, go check them out. You know, check on the hours and go check them out. And like I said, like, the food is solid. I've been there twice already. And listen, I ain't on the bandwagon. I've been down with them since 2022. I've been down with them since last summer. I've been on the wave. All right, just so you know. Yeah. So anyway. Yeah, pay attention to class, you know, make sure you understand percentages, make sure you understand percentage increase problems, percentage decrease problems. Try to go get some practice on problems like that. All right, if you're a young person watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.